I wouldn't question archaeology if it wasn't for a heavenly Father, a creator. But an observation that crossed my mind when it comes to a major problem with the archaeological timeline would be the number of transitional species from ape to man that they miraculously discovered. I say that because they don't have that with any other animal. From one species to another, they don't have a dozen or more transitional species. The problem with that is you can't set out to find anything. Well, you can set out to find anything, but not a specific type of species, like a Tyrannosaurus rex. We know they're in the ground. We know that there are more. If you could, they would. That's just a Tyrannosaurus rex fossil is money, and yet, they're not just finding them because you can't purposely find a specific species. So that alone is very revealing. And yet archaeologists have managed to find a dozen at least. I've heard over a dozen, but I won't say dozens. I'll just keep it at a dozen. That's still really bad. Being conservative, for sure, they claim to have found a dozen transitional species from ape to man. And even offshoots. They say some ape species evolved into other species of man, but they died off. I don't know the specifics. I couldn't care less. To have found so many transitional species is just laughable, because you can't set out with a goal and achieve it. Once again, if you could, they would do that with Tyrannosaurus rex fossils. That's an obvious goal. Why wouldn't they do that? Because they can't. Even though they know where they've found them, it's like, yeah, they can dig all day long for their entire life and not find a T-Rex skull, even just, cool skull. They're cool. I don't deny that. Let alone, skeleton or whatever. And that applies to transitional species, which they just have not found because they can't. If they were challenged, okay, you claim your goal, you were dead set on finding all these transitional species of ape to man, or various offshoots of man, whatever. Okay, do it. Find another set of at least a dozen transitional species between this animal and that animal. They can't do it because it's just not how it works. So that's definitely a problem. Another observation that is very damning, it's a very appropriate word, is there was an edit there because a thing popped up. But yeah, these other observation is conveniently there are, I say, over a dozen variety of ape species that are of all shapes and sizes that can easily fit into the very famous image of the from ape to man, the walking simulator image, I guess, where slowly but surely the ape gets bigger and bigger, and then the last in line, would be a human. Conveniently, we have apes of all shapes and sizes that could easily be just manipulated. These two things, along with my other video, I made another video, it all starts to add up. and it looks really bad. It's a damning observation. You can't, in conclusion, you can't set out to find any specific thing. You're just not reality. Just, I don't know. You either, I can lead the horse to water, but I can't make it drink, kind of thing. The observation is just common sense. It's like using the simple things to realize these complex things are a lie. Not that science is. Archaeology is a real thing. They use methods that I know are legitimate. Specifically, I forget the terms, like cross-referencing, to say triangulation with information, I guess. I don't, other concepts. Archaeology is a real thing, but it's going to be manipulated. If you want to really double down on how damning these observations are, once again, watch my other video. It discusses even more just logical observations that put a real, final nail in the coffin of it's a lie. It's not, I'm not bending over backwards. I'm folding myself into a pretzel. I'm just using common sense and basic observation, which is a legitimate tool to debunk how somebody might make a case, even with evidence. A person builds a case with evidence, which, archaeology, the finds, whatever, though that's evidence. It's just evidence of what? How they interpret it, how they build the evidence, whatever. But then you can look at it with common sense and say, well, wait a second. You make just common sense observations. So that's just another observation. Maybe I know I have many observations. I'm just going to put out videos kind of here and there. But yeah, there you go.
The third fact of our universe, which is gratuitous suffering.
Yeah, suffering.
Gratuitous here means something like unjustified or unwarranted or meaningless.
Suffering.
I do this because it's easy to see how some instances of suffering may be beneficial in certain circumstances or necessary to bring about some desirable state of affairs, some desirable end. But the existence of meaningless or unnecessary suffering does seem to be incompatible with the existence of a God who loves us and has the power to prevent it from happening. We're sometimes told that God has morally sufficient reason to allow suffering to exist. Indeed, if God is good, then he must have such sufficient reason. Perhaps suffering is necessitated by human free will. Perhaps suffering helps to develop a person's moral character, or maybe it's necessary to achieve some other end.
Okay, so he tries to attribute, or he does, or he says, he speculates on why suffering. Maybe it's for this reason or that reason. And this fixation on suffering as a way to disprove God. Suffering ends. Whatever the lifespan of any living thing is, whatever it suffered comes to an end. And I added on top of that with my notes here. Suffering doesn't it's possible suffering doesn't mean anything. Because suffering was never meant to be to begin with. Going all the way back to Adam and Eve, it was never meant to be a thing. So I would dare say, what makes you think suffering means anything? I can say it might not mean anything because it was just never meant to be. Never mind the fact that it ends. Let's see.
That God wishes to bring about. But intuitively, there appear to be instances of suffering that cannot serve any such end. And if even one example of these turns out to be an actual case of unnecessary or meaningless suffering.
Okay. He concludes that meaningless suffering is evidence of no God. That is a conclusion that can't be drawn. Yeah, he concludes that meaningless suffering is evidence of no God. That is a conclusion that he can't draw. Suffering ends. I have stated that I don't know O'Connor's motive. Does he know God's motive? I repeat, suffering was never meant to be. To conclude there is no God because of such finite suffering is revealing. Since suffering exists, if God exists, then we can conclude there is a reason. Because we can't conclude what the reason is, then there is no God. He talks about animal suffering and by all accounts will not be compensated. The finite suffering ends. You just have to understand the implication of suffering ends. You can tell, oh, there's been suffering on this planet for 6,000 years. Well, by all accounts, from the point of view of any one thing, animal or human, the suffering only went on for their lifespan. I've only seen suffering for the number of years I've been on this planet. You can tell me, well, it's existed for 6,000 or 200,000, depending on your point of view. Well, no, I've only seen it go on for, my lifetime. You say, well, the amount of suffering. What are you talking about? It's what the amount of where's the suffering happening right now that I'm seeing? What's going on? What's going on. Yeah, and it all ends. Every single life form that exists, however long it's here for, the suffering ends. It's finite. He never considers the implications of what it means that the suffering ends. He doesn't consider the implications of the fact that the suffering ends. He says the existence of suffering is explained through atheism. Once again, on that note, the existence of suffering is explained through Adam and Eve. So, I don't know what he's trying to say. Like, there's not a better argument here. To attribute there must be a reason is kind of, I don't know, it's weak.
This would be enough to cause a problem. I want to propose something that might sound a little strange at first, which is that the biggest problem for theism here is not, famously, the great, intense sufferings of the world, like holocausts or earthquakes, but rather menial, less significant suffering, like being caught out in the rain, or stubbing your toe, or tripping over a curb on the street. Why? This seems a tad absurd, I'll grant you that, but consider this. When we experience a great suffering, like the death of a loved one, or a devastating earthquake, or indeed a holocaust, it's easy to imagine that this might somehow be part of a grand plan. The depth of our suffering may make us into better people. The people who die may be experiencing a much happier state of affairs in the afterlife now. Perhaps by allowing the Jewish Holocaust to take place, God makes it such that we are far less likely to allow even worse projects of genocide to occur in the future. But what could possibly be served? What possible end could be served? What possible meaning could there be in stubbing your toe, or tripping over a curb, or having a pigeon use your new suit as a restroom? Such instances are not significant. They're usually forgotten within a day or two, and therefore do not and cannot develop the soul. Nor do they seem plausibly part of some grand design or plan. They seem, that is to say, meaningless and unnecessary.
Yeah, and there's every possibility. Even with the existence of God, suffering doesn't serve a purpose. Since it ends, it's finite. And it was never meant to be anyway,
More meaninglessness than instances of, let's say, great or intense suffering, much more meaningless than these. And truly meaningless, unnecessary suffering is certainly more expected in a world without benevolent supervision than in a theistic paradigm.
That's a conclusion you just can't draw. With everything I've said, in terms of all his points, You can't even, how do you draw that conclusion? There's a last thing I wrote at some point in this video, the last point. You can ask God why, but by all means ask the void why. A non-answer doesn't debunk anything. I mean, even with the existence of God, he doesn't answer everything. If the Holy Bible is true, we don't get the answers to everything. You know, ask God why. Well, ask the void why. A non-answer doesn't debunk anything.
Odyssey, in other words, then, needs to provide not only an account of the great and intense sufferings of the world, but also the menial sufferings which pervade the human experience. Now, I'm actually quite surprised that I've made it this far without mentioning animals yet. It's quite unlike me, but that's a final consideration that does deserve our attention.
Yeah, no compensation.
Whatever Theodicy might explain human suffering, the existence of animal suffering seems infinitely more difficult to explain. Animals are not free in the way that we are, and so are immune to the free will defense. They cannot morally develop in the way that we can.
You know, funny, I never used the free will defense. I did address Adam and Eve, which introduced suffering. But now the free will defense, I don't have to address that. I've never, because I never have. I never used it. That's funny. I didn't realize that. No, when it comes to animals, the fact is it ends. You know, it ends. I can't spell that one out. Only you can.
And so are immune to soul-making theodicies. They are, on most accounts, not going to heaven.
Yeah, they all are. They're on most accounts not going to heaven. Why are you saying this? I'm not sure. I don't know what you're getting at.
They will not be compensated for their suffering.
They won't be compensated.
Yet their suffering is immeasurably large.
Okay, once again, it ends. And funny thing, animals in general, they actually just kind of live. They get by. There's this great exaggeration, like there's massive suffering throughout their life. The one thing that's really the problem, predation. But predation is mostly quick. I know hyenas and wild dogs, they are brutal in how they kill their prey. So yes, there are examples of shocking brutality, but most animals, they just kind of live, and then once they're killed, it's pretty quick. Is there dying of disease? Well, yeah, but within a few days. Any animal that's overcome with a disease, it's only got a few days to live. We mistake our suffering from diseases because we draw it out through medicines. So what he's about to say, like the list of, let me have him play it.
Somewhere, right now, billions of animals are suffering in the...
Billions of animals are suffering. Really? I see the birds flying. I see the squirrels running around, healthy. I see coyotes. I mean, billions in it. This is a meaningless claim he's making. He has a point, actually. Well, he says something. Let it play.
From predation, from disease.
Disease. Yeah, you die within a few days. Very quick. And it's just the idea that it's like suffering. I mean,
from hunger, from fear.
Hunger and fear. I guarantee you they're not filled with fear 24/7. Hunger. Have you seen squirrels? I mean, they're pretty healthy looking. He's greatly exaggerating this point. He does say predation, but overwhelmingly it's quick. I'm pretty sure that I'm saying I'm pretty sure. I'm not just stating things. My money's on most animals when they die of predation. It's quick.
Imagine a deer with its leg caught under...
Oh, yeah, he gives an example. But yeah, the deer would die within a few days.
Yeah. Fallen tree, dying of starved confusion. It doesn't know why it's there. It feels hungry, it's starving to death, and it's trapped under a tree, and it has no idea why.
Yeah, and it will endure for a few days, and then it will pass. And it's over. It's like, I don't know what you're getting at, buddy.
What could possibly
He's
be
so fixated on such a finite experience, a laughably finite experience.
purpose or meaning of this?
What could be the purpose? No purpose. That's just as possible. Even with the existence of God, there doesn't have to be a purpose. He's blatantly assuming.
I'll remind you that this is exactly
And this whole video, so much that's misleading.
exactly the kind of thing that we should expect to see if the natural world is an amoral arena of accidentally existing organisms fighting with each other to stay alive. But can we really expect this on theism? Should we expect this on theism? What offers a better account? Keep in mind that, in other words, I'm not arguing that theism can offer no account of these kinds of situations and sufferings, though I am skeptical that it can. I'm only arguing that
He phrases it with a better account. It's you're phrasing your what's the word? Prefacing, I guess. I don't know.
that theism is
Prefacing it
false
wrong.
offers a better account of it than assuming
Yeah, better. There's nothing but better. Something about
theism
better.
is true. Assume atheism. Assume that humans
Can an account be given? Yeah, account can be given. It's not better or worse, just an account.
and other animals are nothing more than evolved creatures who developed pain receptors to make them more prone to avoiding the menial and great sufferings that upset our survival prospects. On this account, the existence of all suffering, small and great, is not only explained, but expected. Thus, atheism offers a better account, in my view, than theism of three crucial and unavoidable facts: divine hiddenness, geographical religious statistics, and the existence of gratuitous human and non-human suffering. And I am truly excited to hear how Jonathan might account for these on theism in defending it as a more plausible account of our reality. Thank you.
All right, so yeah, this was a debate. There's more to the video. And I can only record so much. There was an answer to every single thing he said. It has nothing to do with better. Just there was a response. There was an answer. It has nothing to do with better. I don't know what else to say. The phrasing, no. But anyway, so I'll do. The last thing I'll say is, the politically correct thing. I'm not a fan of that because it kind of defeats the purpose. But this has nothing to do with like animosity towards Alex O'Connor. He strikes me as just a normal guy, which is fine. I like that. I'm a normal guy. He has ideas and he's doing what he's doing for whatever reason, and it just seems like a normal person. A lot of people are like, oh, you must hate Alex O'Connor. I don't know. I'm Christian. It has nothing with hate. It just, there are erroneous ideas that people hold to, and there are very easy answers to give, which makes me wonder, why don't they understand these things? Why can't they give these answers? I just did. But whatever.